Hey, Holy Girls, welcome back to Holy Girl Talk, the home for women who want faith that feels like oxygen, conversations that feel like therapy, and God in a way that feels real. Today's episode is one that might change how you see your entire life, because today we're talking about the things God delivered you from without you ever realizing it. Before we go anywhere, I want you to do something with me. Just place one hand gently on your chest and breathe. Inhale slowly through your nose and exhale through your mouth. Because what we're about to talk about is not loud, it's not hype, it is quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you realize that God has been doing more for you than you ever gave him credit for. This episode is about the stories you never saw, the miracles you didn't feel, the disasters you never walked into, the heartbreaks you never experienced, the opportunities that never landed because they were never meant to. And I want to say this early. If someone's face comes to mind while you're listening, don't ignore that. That is spiritual. If someone you love is walking around feeling like life is against her, but she doesn't realize God has been saving her, share this with her, send it, text it, put it in her DMs. You never know when your obedience becomes her awakening. Now, let's ground this moment. I want you to think about your life, zoom out like you're looking from above. Think about how many directions it could have taken. Think about the rooms you almost walked into. Think about the people you almost ended up with. Think about the decisions that could have changed everything forever. And then I want you to imagine God standing between you and the things you never saw coming, standing between you and the night that could have broken you, standing between you and someone you thought was everything who would have destroyed you spiritually. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not what God did. Sometimes the greatest miracle is what God never let happen. This episode is about waking up to that. Let's step into something most believers never stop long enough to consider. God's greatest works are often invisible, the things he does without announcement, without spotlight, without applause, the things he doesn't even wait for you to pray about because he sees danger forming long before you ever recognize it exists. We romanticize miracles that make noise, the testimonies we can post, the answered prayers we can point to, the moments where God moved in a way everyone could see. But heaven has another library, a private archive of miracles you will never know about. The attacks that never landed, the conversations that never happened, the trauma that never touched you, the invitation that never reached your phone, the wrong person who never had access to you. God is a protector first, before he is a provider. And protection often looks like nothing. Nothing went wrong. Nothing happened. Nothing exploded. Nothing ended. Nothing fell apart. And so you assume nothing was needed. But hear this, your normal days are evidence of supernatural defense. Peace is not random, it is often purchased by a war you never had to fight. There were unseen battles fought without your participation. There were spiritual negotiations that happened before you ever woke up. There were traps that were never triggered because God dismantled them in the dark. Protection is often so quiet you only notice it when you develop spiritual hindsight. Think about morning routines. You wake up, you check your phone, you yawn, you get dressed. But while you slept, God was guarding your mind. God was screening who could access you. God was closing doors in realms you cannot perceive. Angels were standing watch at your bedside and you didn't even know. Protection is not always dramatic. Sometimes protection looks like the person forgetting to text you, a gut feeling telling you don't go tonight, a random inconvenience delaying you by 10 minutes, a friendship becoming awkward and fading, your own spirit suddenly losing interest in something that once consumed you. When God protects you, it rarely looks like a cinematic Marvel battle. It looks like your day simply going on. And because he doesn't stop your life to get credit, you often walk past his miracles like they were just coincidence. But nothing is coincidence when it comes to the daughters of God. Nothing is random when destiny is on the line. Nothing just happens when heaven is involved. If you only knew how many times God has positioned himself like a shield between you and what could have changed your life in the worst way, you would fall to your knees in gratitude. And one day, I believe when we meet God face to face, he will show us everything we never saw. And I imagine there will be a moment where we whisper, God, I had no idea you carried me so much more than I realized. Sometimes deliverance does not feel holy. It does not feel spiritual. Sometimes it feels like pain. Sometimes God saves you by letting something fall apart. Sometimes God protects you by letting someone leave. Sometimes the greatest rescue of your life was the thing you cried over, begged for, prayed would stay, that God knew He had to remove. Because as women, we confuse familiarity with destiny. We assume that because something fit at one time, it means it's meant for all time, but God sees what you cannot. He sees who you become in that relationship. He sees your spirit shrinking under someone's voice. He sees your peace dying slowly without you realizing it. He sees the version of you that disappears when you try to be loved by someone who does not know how to hold a woman like you. And so he intervenes, not by snatching it abruptly, not always by dramatic endings. Sometimes deliverance is slow. Sometimes it starts with distance. Conversations feel shallow. The energy shifts. Your spirit no longer feels safe there. You start asking yourself what changed. You think it's you, but often it's God. A door closing rarely sounds like a slam. Sometimes it sounds like metal gently clicking into place. Sometimes deliverance looks like a job rejection that shattered your confidence only for you to discover a year later that burnout would have destroyed you if you had gotten it. Sometimes deliverance looks like a friend who stopped calling you and you felt abandoned, only to later realize her influence would have shaped your identity more than scripture ever could. Sometimes deliverance is that guy who never texted you after the date and you spiraled. But the truth is, God protected your heart from becoming emotionally bonded to a man who never had the capacity to cover you. The hardest part of spiritual maturity is this: God's protection often feels like loss before it feels like love. You don't understand it in the moment. In the moment, you feel rejected, abandoned, forgotten. But one day, usually years later, you look back and whisper, "Thank you, God, for saying no when I couldn't." Deliverance doesn't always feel like rescue. Sometimes it feels like heartbreak, and yet it was mercy. Sometimes God delivers you not by removing something, but by redirecting you before you ever get close enough to be harmed. Not all rescue looks like loss. Some of it looks like confusion. Some of it looks like suddenly losing interest in something you swore you wanted. Some of it looks like being on the way to a place and randomly canceling because you were tired. You do not know how many timelines those moments shifted. You do not know how many versions of your life God rerouted with something as simple as inconvenience. There are seasons where you wake up and realize you don't crave what once consumed you. The person you thought was the one, your body no longer responds. The environments you used to feel alive in suddenly feel unsafe. The habits that once numbed you, you don't have the desire anymore. That is deliverance through appetite change. God doesn't always snatch things away. Sometimes He simply removes the hunger for what would have destroyed you. And then there are the plans, the ones you wrote down, dreamed about, told people about, built your identity around that never worked out. You called it failure, but what if it was timing? What if it was God saying, "Baby, you are not ready"? Not because you're inadequate, but because I'm building a version of you who won't lose herself when she gets what she prayed for. We don't talk enough about this. God sometimes delays what you want because premature blessings can feel like curses. A blessing at the wrong time is a battle. Sometimes He disrupts your life on purpose. You think something is going wrong because everything is shifting. But displacement is often divine. God will close a door you were committed to. He will shake you out of a place you were comfortable in. He will let a season expire even when it still looks livable because He knows that comfort can become captivity. Redirection is one of the most merciful things God ever does. Because you do not always know what you are being saved from, you only know that your life didn't go the way you planned. There is nothing scarier and more holy than when God changes your taste, because once He changes what you desire, hell loses its primary weapon. You can no longer be tempted by the things that once owned you, and that quietly, invisibly, is deliverance. Some of the most profound deliverance you've ever experienced never involved another person or an external situation. It happened inside you, quietly, slowly, in ways you didn't even mark on your calendar. You simply woke up one day and realized, wow, I'm not her anymore. There were seasons you lived in survival mode where panic was your alarm clock and anxiety was the soundtrack of your day. You used to rehearse worst case scenarios, catastrophize everything, assume disappointment before it even arrived, and now you breathe differently, you think differently, you recover faster, you don't spiral the way you used to, you didn't attend a ceremony for that transformation, no one applauded. But God delivered you from fear without you even noticing the chains falling. There was a time when you believed validation was oxygen, where someone's attention determined your worth, where love felt like compensation for wounds you never received healing for, and yet slowly, without a dramatic revelation, God changed that. Now, approval does not own you the way it once did. Your standards rose, your spirit became wiser, you stopped letting desperation lead you. That is deliverance. There were habits, ways you coped to survive, emotional attachments you clung to, numbness you used to create silence inside your mind, behaviors you swore you could never outgrow. You didn't quit them because of willpower. You simply became someone who no longer needed them. That is what spiritual maturity looks like. God transforming your identity until your patterns become incompatible with the woman you are now. Think about the way you respond to conflict now compared to who you used to be. Think about the boundaries you set. Think about how you no longer beg to be chosen. Think about how you no longer chase chaos to feel alive. That shift wasn't therapy alone. That shift wasn't time alone. That shift was God healing what broke you before you even learned the words for the pain. Internal deliverance is when God says you will not spend another decade living enslaved to what wounded you. And instead of ripping you away from everything, He slowly, kindly strengthens your spirit until you outgrow your chains. That is deliverance that cannot be undone. I want you to imagine this with me because sometimes the only way to truly understand deliverance is to visualize it. There was a night, maybe years ago, when you were exhausted but determined to go out, and something stopped you: a text, a headache, a last minute cancellation. You stayed home and thought nothing of it. But what if, in another timeline, that night changed everything? What if something happened there that wounded your spirit, broke your confidence, or put you in danger? In this life, you never knew, because God intervened before the story even had a beginning. Think about the time a man you liked simply disappeared. He didn't call, he didn't explain, it left you confused, embarrassed, questioning your worth. What you didn't see was this: God blocked the emotional bond before it had the chance to become a soul tie, before you gave pieces of your heart to someone who was never meant to hold sacred things. Sometimes rejection is how God keeps you from heartbreak that would have taken you years to recover from. Picture the job you desperately wanted, the one you told everyone about, the one you thought would change your life. You didn't get it. And in the moment, you felt humiliated. But now imagine the version of you who got that job: exhausted, overworked, underpaid, spiritually dry, emotionally depleted. Imagine the relationships you would have neglected, the mental health you would have lost, the calling that would have gone dormant. The no that bruised your ego saved your destiny. Think about friendships that faded slowly, awkwardly, without closure. You assumed it was personal, but what if God was protecting you from influence, from someone who would have normalized dysfunction, from someone who would have pulled you away from who you are becoming? Not every friendship is meant to stay, and sometimes God ends connections before they have a chance to become chains. Now, think about this. Have you ever looked back at old photos of yourself and thought, I didn't even know how close I was to breaking? The woman in those pictures didn't know the danger she was in emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and yet she survived. Not because she was strong, but because she was carried. Deliverance is not only what God pulled you out of. Deliverance is also everything He never let touch you. The tragedy you never felt, the betrayal you never experienced, the trauma you never endured, the heartbreak that never happened. You will never know how many disasters were canceled before they ever existed, because God decided your story was not going to go that way. We rarely notice deliverance in real time because when you are inside the moment, all you can feel is what you lost, not what you were saved from. Pain blinds perspective. Emotion fogs discernment. When something ends, the instinct is to grieve, not to analyze. When a door closes, the instinct is to question yourself, not to honor the barrier. When God reroutes your life, the instinct is to panic, not to praise. We don't notice deliverance because we equate what we want with what must be good. We assume desire equals destiny. And so when God interrupts desire, it feels like rejection rather than protection. But sometimes what you wanted was shaped by wounds, not wisdom. Sometimes what you prayed for was rooted in insecurity, not identity. Sometimes God has to disappoint the girl you were to protect the woman you are becoming. Deliverance also goes unnoticed because God does not ask for attention before He intervenes. He doesn't pause your life and say, hey, watch me save you. He simply does it because His character is not dependent on your applause. He is Father, not performer. And fathers don't need their children to notice every act of protection to keep protecting. They do it because they love. But there is a spiritual maturity that comes when you begin to recognize God's subtle hand. When you start seeing closed doors differently. When you begin to say, God, show me what you spared me from, show me what could have happened, show me what didn't. That level of awareness changes your language, your gratitude, your patience, your trust, because a woman who knows she has been delivered becomes harder to shake. She walks through life differently, slower, more grounded, less desperate, more brave. She trusts what God removes and she honors what He protects. This is why reflection is a spiritual discipline, because transformation is often invisible until you return and trace where God has been. Journaling, breathwork, sitting in silence, whispering, God, what did you save me from that I forgot? These are not small things. These are practices that train you to see, because hindsight is where gratitude is born. Once your eyes open to His unseen work, disappointment doesn't hit the same. You stop calling yourself unlucky. You stop obsessing over timelines. You stop apologizing for people who left. You stop mourning rooms you outgrew. You begin to trust that nothing was random, and that everything God blocked was mercy. There is something holy about realizing you have been protected your entire life, even on the days you felt abandoned. There is something healing about understanding that you did not survive because you were strong. You survived because heaven refused to let certain things touch you. And I want you to receive this. If God has delivered you before you ever knew you needed it, He will deliver you again. The proof is in your history, even the parts you forgot. You have been kept, carried, guarded, redirected, hidden when necessary, revealed when ready, and you weren't even aware of it. So as you move forward, I want you to walk differently. Keep your chin a little higher, move a little slower, trust a little deeper. Because a woman who knows she is covered lives life with a holy kind of confidence. She no longer begs for what leaves. She no longer breaks over what ends. She no longer panics over delays. She understands that if God doesn't allow it, she doesn't need it. And like always, I want to remind you, if someone came to mind during this episode, or if your spirit nudged you about a friend, a sister, someone who has been grieving closed doors but doesn't realize she has been saved, don't keep this to yourself. Share it, send it, tell her, listen to this. It will make sense of your life. That is ministry. That is sisterhood. That is how healing spreads. Now, wherever you are, if it is safe to do so, close your eyes, let your shoulders release, feel your body soften. I want to pray over you. God, I thank you for this woman, for the one listening right now who is realizing, maybe for the first time, that her life could have looked so different and yet you intervened. God, I ask that you open her eyes, let her see the invisible fingerprints of your protection. Show her the nights you shielded her. Show her the trauma she never had to endure. Show her the relationships that never formed because you stood in the way. Show her the dangers that never reached her. God, let her spirit be flooded with gratitude, not just for what you gave, but for what you never allowed. God, I pray that you deliver her again, quietly, gently, powerfully. Deliver her from mindsets that keep her small. Deliver her from emotional exhaustion. Deliver her from insecurity and fear disguised as ambition. Deliver her from relationships that drain her. Deliver her from being attracted to what harms her. Deliver her from every version of life that is beneath who you created her to be. Lord, give her discernment. Let her feel in her body when something is not for her. Let her lose her appetite for what would break her. Let peace be her confirmation and confusion be her caution. Let her obey your no with the same trust she gives to your yes. Teach her to trust the closing of a door as much as the opening of one. And God, heal the places where your protection felt like abandonment. Every disappointment she never understood. Every moment she thought you forgot her. Redeem the confusion, fill the gaps, speak to her spirit, and let her know you were there. You have always been there. I bless her story. I bless her future. I bless her heart. May she never again say, nothing happened without remembering that nothing might have been the miracle. Amen. Thank you for being here, holy girls. Thank you for showing up for yourself and for letting God show up for you. If this episode moved you, if it made you breathe differently, if it shifted something in you, share it. And if you ever need prayer, a place to send testimony, or a topic request, you already know, holygirltalkpodcast@gmail.com. I love you. God has been delivering you your whole life, even when you never saw it.